Hi, I'm Seamless, and this is the 15th 75K tutorial. This one is requested by Coco something. Totally had a page. Where is it? Cocosurrounded. And it is a subfocus sound. This is the subfocus sound. And this is the sound that I made. Which is like 1,000 times louder than it needs to be. Because it was in this channel. Actually, that's the other channel. Whatever. Turn it down. So, there's minor differences between the sound and the other sound. Mostly that this one, the one that I'm doing, has a lot of high frequency content. And I mean, if whether or not you want to have the high frequency content is up to you, but then there's also kind of very noticeable degradation of the high frequencies, which happens in a lot of MP3s and streamed content, which is how I record these. But so if you want to do that yourself, then you can low pass it. The crux of this sound is done through something called oscillator sync, which most plugins have a way to do. The guy actually who requested this specifically said that he didn't want to do it with Massive, and like I was gonna anyway. But Massive does have it has an oscillator sync wavetable, and I think it's called hard sync or something like that. And that's what this is. Oscillator sync as a process is actually very interesting, but we can do it. What we're doing here is we're syncing square wave, and we're doing this by FMing a square wave with a saw wave, and that creates that behavior. Other things I'm doing include I'm vibratoing the pitch. This is what this LFO is on it, and on the modulator, I'm not vibratoing it, but there's actually a slightly different sound if I did. So it's kind of up to you whether or not you want to do that. I'm also steadily increasing the volume over time because you control the intensity of the FM by changing the volume of the modulating operator. So I'm changing the volume of the modulating operator to go up over time, which is changing the intensity of the FM. What else am I doing? I'm doing a slight pitch bump because you can kind of see that it does it in the frequency spectrum. But what's kind of special about what it's doing in the frequency spectrum is you can see that it's moving and causing differences in the sound, but it's actually staying in the harmonic range. Like it's moving up and you can see it moving, but it's kind of switching between different harmonics, and the harmonics themselves are not moving. Well, I mean, some of them, they might be moving. It's kind of, the accuracy is not super amazing right in the very beginning there, but it doesn't look as if the main sound's pitch is actually changing, but instead it's the modulation of its pitch that is changing. And it'll sound an awful lot like the main pitch is changing. I mean, technically it is changing, but we'll explain about that when we get to the nitty gritty, what the oscillator sync actually does. But right now we're doing, how to actually do this. So, that's not doing anything. That's not doing anything. This is mostly just what's going on here. Now, this isn't very intense. It's the same pitch level of it, so it's just first level FM in terms of pitch. But I'm keeping it fairly low key. If I were to just do this with a regular sort of empty one, it could show you how far it goes just by doing it. So here's our square wave. Here's our saw wave. I apologize if that damaged you. I really should have had this leveled before I started. I think I do. I think it might actually be fine, but we'll find out, I guess. The rest of the difference between what just happened here and the sound that I made is mostly just embellishments with things like pitch movement and vibrato and that kind of thing. There's also like reverb and delay and like that inside the sound in here. However, the delay is filtered. And I was just going to do that with the effects built into Citrus. However, the delay inside Citrus does not have a filter on it. Although, I guess if I were smart, what I could do is I could actually delay the filter. I'm going to do that. That's actually a way smarter plan than what I was doing before. That's right in there, right? Yeah. Enable. There it is. See, because the thing about the FX routing and Citrus is that the effects, when you turn it on, it's completely only the effects. The dry wet mix is handled by having the out and the effects on at the same time. So if I had like some other oscillator like I'm doing now and I had the effects on it, it's only the effects. The dry is not going out with it. Oops, I'm in the wrong key. Or whatever, you know what I mean. So cool. That's a neat thing to do that you can do in Citrus. So do that. Did that. Good. I don't need that anymore. Now, so how does oscillator sync work? Is a question you might probably not care about at this point. Whatever. This is in the description if you want to download it and leave. But this is how oscillator sync works. The way that it works is that you have two oscillators, a master and a slave. The master oscillator is the pitch. It's the regular pitch you're playing. It doesn't really matter what the waveform is, but it has a particular oscillator length because a waveform has a period. So like, this waveform has however long it is, and how short the individual oscillation is how long the overall master length is. If you have another waveform, actually a really easy way to show this would be the sync function inside Serum, because the Serum also does this, because a lot of plugins do this. So we could look at this window length right here as being how that particular note. And if I turn on the sync business, you can see it making little copies of itself while it's doing it. And what's happening though is that essentially we're playing a higher pitched waveform, because now like this is the original waveform, what it looks like. So if I do this is like 6 of them now, but however long it is, it terminates and it restarts in phase with the master waveform. Now, what does it have to do with FM and saw waves? Well, if you're familiar with how FM works in the digital plane, then you should probably already know. But if you don't, let's do a quick run through. FM stands for frequency modulation, which means that you're changing the pitch of something really, really fast. You can think of these individual oscillators as being LFO sources, only it's just a lot faster. LFO stands for low frequency oscillation, which is to say that it's oscillating so slowly that you can only detect individual motion and not, blur together as being a tone. What a sound sounds like. Any kind of tone or pitch or frequency is being determined by a speed of a particular waveform's oscillation. A low frequency oscillation is too slow to be detected as a tone. The tone oscillation is referred to as audio rate oscillation, being that you can hear it as being a thing, as opposed to just being like, okay, all right, it's moving, gotcha. Now, FM is all about modulating a parameter at stupidly high speeds. So when you do that with pitch, it makes new sounds. That's why it's cool. You can do this in the analog world just fine. You can just plug an oscillator into another oscillator's pitch parameter, and it'll just go off into infinity. The problem with digital synthesis is that you cannot operate particular parameters that speedily. There are problems with it. I'm not 100% sure what or why, but there just are. And in the analog world, there's a limitation in the sense that oscillators are never truly pitch perfect. They're not really the right. There's not really such a thing as a starting phase with most analog synthesizers. They're just kind of always on. So this means controlling a lot of modulation is a gigantic pain in the ass. So enter the Yamaha DX7, the first digital FM synthesizer. And in fact, it's the FM synthesizer that every single digital FM synthesizer is based on. Anything that has FM is based on that concept, at least in the digital sense. So the way that this works is that instead of modulating pitch, because you can't, it modulates phase. And why does it do that? Phase is the starting position of the waveform. So if I change phase, it's like, oh, look, it's moving. It's starting. Yeah, cool, whatever. If you move the phase without playing it and you play it, it makes no difference whatsoever to anything. It's still going to be the same pitch. It's not going to sound like you changed anything. It has implications in terms of like actual tone and modulation, but pitch stays the same. Our goal is to modulate pitch. So why do we do that? Well, as it turns out, if you modulate phase while something's playing, you're changing the beginning, you're moving the waveform's position while you're playing it. And it's kind of like if you're on a train and you walk forward, you are moving now faster than the train is while it's moving. So it's also not unlike the Doppler effect is the example I usually give. Trains, what the hell? But the Doppler effect is where you hear a car and you hear the horns, and when the car is moving, the horns sound or something, or any kind of sound to do with the car feels like it's gaining in pitch when it comes at you, and then it gets lower in pitch as it goes away from you. That's because the starting position of the sound is moving while it's playing. This changes the apparent pitch of the sound. So if you do that, then it makes changes the pitch. So that's why it modulates phase. The problems with this are that when you're modulating phase, the shapes don't necessarily mean what they used to mean. For example, if I modulate a sine wave by another sine wave, you'd get movement that you'd expect of a sine wave, pretty whatever back and forth. But if I modulate a triangle wave with a sine wave, you get behavior you'd expect of a square wave, which is to say a pitch and then suddenly another pitch with no motion in between. Why is that? And that's because of the phase motion and not the direct motion. The phase motion is essentially saying that instead of the movement of the waveform that's causing the movement of the pitch, it's the shape of the waveform that's causing the movement of the pitch. So because it's movement while you're moving it while it's happening, if you move faster, if you increase your speed of movement while you're moving it, it increases the pitch of the pitch. But if you have a solid, regular, like single speed of motion, you're not increasing or decreasing speed, then you have one pitch. It's a different pitch, but you have one pitch. So if you look at a sine wave, you can see that the sine wave is changing its speed as it's moving around all the time. So that means that the pitch is changing all the time. But if you look at a triangle wave, you can see that the speed of the change isn't changing at all. The speed is stable in one direction and then changes to another direction immediately. So this means you get one pitch and another pitch. This also explains why when you do FM with a saw wave or a square wave, stuff you don't expect to happen at all ends up happening. So this is what we're looking at. We're looking at this as being one solid pitch. And I'm looking at this as saying that it's essentially the same pitch, and then the same pitch again, just in a different phase. 360 and 0 are the same position in as far as phase goes. But the saw wave, and all this is why the saw wave essentially elicits oscillator sync. Because what this is saying is that it's changing the pitch of the waveform only for the duration of the waveform, and it restarts after the end of the main oscillation. So if it's the same pitch as the waveform that you're choosing, then you're essentially oscillator syncing it to that pitch. In this case, this is. So that right now, this is changing the pitch. So it's making the waveform be a different pitch during the duration of the original oscillation's length, but then it keeps restarting at the beginning of the oscillation. And that's oscillator sync. In fact, I mean, I'm not totally sure about this, but it's totally possible that oscillator sync is mostly just done by FM as a result. Serum's oscillator sync is a product of, I guess, what I call brute forcing it, which is to say it's doing it because it's being told to do it. It's actually possible that this is being caused by FM and just doing it in a more delicate way, because doing it with FM does have some interesting artifacts that I haven't noticed in other synths that do it like just as its own thing. And I don't know if it's a wavetable in Massive or if it's a particular actual sync thing, but if you ever see sync in a synth, that's what it does, and it creates this sound. That was a very long-winded explanation about something that's very simple. Anyway, if you have any questions about that, please let me know. This patch is available for download in the description of this video. If you would like to make a request yourself, please do so in the Reddit thread. Requests made anywhere else will be ignored. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all that fun stuff. And as usual, have a nice day.